Have you ever looked up at a big, puffy cloud and thought it looks just like a giant piece of cotton candy? It seems so light and soft. But here's a wild fact. That cloud is made of water. And we all know water is heavy. So why doesn't a cloud just fall out of the sky like a giant, wet blanket? And while we're at it, where does rain even come from? Does water just magically appear up there? To solve these mysteries, we're going to put on our scientist hats and follow the journey of water, step by step, from the ground, up into the sky, and all the way back down again. Let's start with a puddle. You see one after it rains, big and shimmering. But come back a day later, and it's smaller. After a few more days, it might be completely gone. So, where did the water go? It didn't just vanish. It went somewhere. This is our first clue. Water can turn into an invisible gas and rise up into the air. This magical sounding process has a name: evaporation. Evaporation happens when water molecules get enough energy to break free from the liquid and float away into the air. What gives them that energy? Warmth. That's why a puddle disappears much faster on a hot, sunny day. You can see a super fast version of this when you boil water for pasta. That steam rising from the pot? That's water in its gas form. But water doesn't need to be boiling to evaporate. It's happening all the time, quietly and slowly. The surface of the ocean is evaporating. Lakes and rivers are evaporating. Even the dew on the grass in the morning evaporates. And get this, when you sweat, your skin is helping water evaporate right off your body. So, the sky is constantly collecting water, even on a perfectly clear, dry day. Okay, so if water is always rising into the air, why isn't the world just permanently foggy? This brings us to a key idea. Warm air can hold more of this invisible water gas, which we call water vapor, than cold air can. When the air is warm, the water vapor can spread out and stay invisible. So, what happens when this warm, wet air starts to rise up into the sky? Well, as it goes higher, it gets colder. The pressure is lower up there, so the air expands, and just like a can of spray paint gets cold when you use it, expanding air cools down. Now, this cool air can't hold onto all that water vapor anymore. It's reached its limit, so the water vapor has to change back into a liquid. This is called condensation. Condensation is when water vapor turns back into tiny liquid droplets. You've seen this happen a million times. Think about a cold glass of lemonade on a hot day. The outside of the glass gets all wet, right? That water isn't leaking through the glass. It's water vapor from the air around it, cooling down on the cold surface and turning back into liquid water. The exact same thing happens high up in the sky. As the rising air cools, the invisible water vapor condenses into trillions of tiny, tiny water droplets. These little droplets gather together, and that massive collection of tiny droplets is what we see as a cloud. So a cloud isn't one solid object. It's an enormous group of microscopic water droplets, or sometimes tiny ice crystals, all floating together in the air. And this finally answers our first big question. Why don't clouds fall? It's because the droplets that make them up are incredibly small and light. They're so tiny that the air itself can easily hold them up. If you've ever seen dust motes dancing in a sunbeam, you've seen how tiny particles can just hang in the air. Cloud droplets are often even smaller than that. Plus, the air inside and around a cloud is never still. It's always moving. There are gentle upward currents of air, called updrafts, that are constantly pushing up from below. These updrafts act like a helping hand, keeping all those tiny droplets suspended high in the sky. A cloud stays up because it's made of tiny, lightweight droplets and is supported by moving air. All right, but if the cloud droplets are just floating, How do we ever get rain? Rain begins when those tiny cloud droplets start to grow. They grow by bumping into each other and sticking together, a process called coalescence. A tiny droplet collides with another. They merge, and now you have a slightly bigger droplet. This happens over and over, millions of times. In colder clouds, ice crystals can form, and they are fantastic at collecting water vapor and growing larger. But either way, the main idea is the same. Small, floating droplets become bigger, heavier droplets. Eventually, they grow so big and heavy that the updrafts can no longer hold them up. Gravity finally takes over, and the droplets begin to fall. And that falling water is what we call rain. So, rain isn't suddenly created. Rain is what happens when a cloud has done its job of growing water droplets big enough to fall back to Earth. Now, think about the different kinds of rain you've experienced. Sometimes it's a gentle, soft drizzle. That usually comes from flatter, calmer clouds where the droplets grow slowly. Other times, it's a heavy, pounding downpour. That's often from tall, towering clouds with strong updrafts, where droplets grow very large, very quickly. And if the air is cold enough all the way down, those droplets will fall as ice crystals instead of liquid water. We call that snow. And what about hail? Hailstones form in powerful thunderstorms with incredibly strong updrafts. These updrafts toss ice pellets up and down inside the cloud, adding a new layer of ice each time until they're so heavy they come crashing down. So let's put the whole amazing story together. Water on the ground from oceans, lakes, and even plants gets warmed by the sun and evaporates into water vapor. This warm, moist air rises and cools. The water vapor then condenses into tiny droplets to form clouds. Inside the clouds, these droplets collide and grow bigger. When they get heavy enough, they fall back to the ground as rain, or snow, or hail. This water then collects in rivers and lakes, flows back to the ocean, and the whole process starts all over again. This is the water cycle. It's Earth's incredible, endless recycling system. Think about it for a second. What would happen if we didn't have a water cycle? Some parts of the world would dry up completely. Plants and animals would struggle to survive. The water cycle isn't just about the weather. It's a fundamental life support system for our entire planet. Here's a little sky quest for you. Next time you're outside, compare the clouds on 2 different days. On a calm day, do the clouds look flat and spread out? On a day that feels like a storm might be coming, do they look tall and bumpy like cauliflower? Those tall, bumpy clouds are a sign of strong rising air, which means a better chance of rain. And after it rains, take a deep breath. Does the air feel fresher, cleaner? That's because rain literally washes dust and pollutants out of the atmosphere. So, the next time you see a cloud drifting by, remember what you've learned. It's not a heavy blanket about to fall. It's a magnificent, floating collection of tiny water droplets on an incredible journey. And rain isn't just water falling from the sky, it's water returning home, one drop at a time, ready to start its journey all over again. Thanks for watching. And don't forget to look up. See you next time.